Tracy, let's build off of that. Discovery is a super intense time of emotions, I think for both spouses involved. Um, how do we navigate that well? And that seems like such a funny question. How do we navigate like the worst moment in our life potentially? But in this kind of space, what would we encourage people not to do? Like, here are the things, and maybe one of them is minimizing the situation, but what else can you think of what not to do at the moment after discovery?
I think that is a really good question for people, because that kind of talks about what we're naturally going to want to do. And then later on say, oh, I wish that I had some support. I wish I had someone tell me what not to do.
Yeah.
So a few things that came to mind for me, several, but one of them was disclosure. Sometimes it's actually often people will start asking questions. I want to know everything. You better tell me everything. And the partner might be blurting out information or giving partial information, which is also harmful. That happens a lot. You really need support to help you in this area. So I think most people across the board would say that you need help and support. A lot of people do it that way because that's our natural inclination. And we don't know, right? Well, once we have heard from other people who've experienced like, oh, there's a better way to do this. So on the opposite of that, get support to have what we call a full therapeutic disclosure, but that's where you're writing out a timeline. You've done the healing work as the struggling spouse. You've done the healing work to be honest, to write it out, and to share it with that person. And they've done the work, or at least enough to be able to show up and receive and hear that and make this a line in the sand that we're drawing to be able to move forward. I think that's a huge part of healing. And I just see it done a lot where we start asking a lot of questions. It's understandable. We want answers, and so we can get into that. Another one is just making major decisions. So counselors, coaches will mostly recommend not to make a big decision about the marriage in the first year if you're getting support and if you're invested in healing. But I would say other major decisions in your life. So your nervous system has been very overwhelmed. It's looking for safety. So little things that you do in your daily life, with your cup of coffee, or if it's your whatever, listening to music, setting up those and keeping those going, I think is just really important, and something that I try to help betrayed partners do, because they're just overwhelmed. And that creates this little sense of safety and normalcy when our life feels like it's not normal at all. Another one is telling no one or telling everyone. So we have this feeling of, I either want to throw this person under the bus or I want to protect them. And we're not sure which one is showing up on this day. But I would just say being really careful around who we share and how we share. That's a don't, because we have a natural inclination maybe to either tell no one and isolate ourselves, or just start blurting it out because we're so angry. So those are some of the initial, I think, really big ones.
Yeah. Yeah, another dynamic to be aware of is it's a deeply emotional time. And if we're experiencing deep emotions, sometimes we can become reactive to those emotions. And so for the betrayed spouse who's discovered something, there will at times be a reaction to say, they have hurt me so deeply, I want to now hurt them so they know how it feels. And while that might be a justified emotion, if we act on it, it infinitely complicates the situation. And it does not, as we know, revenge doesn't produce what we want. It just creates more pain and more anger and more to deal with. And so, again, what you're feeling, totally understandable and justifiable, but to act on it will make next steps that much more challenging. On the flip side, if we are the spouse who's been discovered and our stuff's come to light, maybe we've heard some things from our spouse like, well, I'm leaving you, or I'll never trust you again, or I'll never, or this is going to happen, and there's threats coming out of anger. And we can go to that place of, well, fine then, I'm just giving up. Well, she's going to leave me anyway, so I guess I might as well, and it's kind of the principle of the whole, like, at some point you got to stop digging. If you want to recover, you're going to have to stop digging. And so no matter what, maybe intense emotion or threats or anger's coming at you, if you also go and act on your emotions of giving up and, well, I guess it doesn't matter, again, you're going to make a difficult situation that much worse, and you're going to create that much more pain and baggage and stuff to deal with. And I would say that even if the marriage doesn't make, like, even if those threats come true, even if those worst case things that maybe they say to you are what happens, if you go off the deep end with additional choices, you're just making your future that much more difficult and adding to the baggage you're going to have to deal with. So again, the emotions themselves are totally understandable because this is a very emotional situation. But we need to guard our heart against acting on them in a way that's going to make recovery for us or for the marriage that much more difficult.
Something that keeps coming to mind as you guys are sharing is, and this is sort of answering the other side of the question, but I feel like in these moments, what I often hear from the church or have heard from people in this situation, the church's response to them is like, don't separate, don't get into two different places of living, don't create space. And I want to just say that, Tracy, what you said about not making a decision for the first year if you're doing work on both ends, I think is very valid, but that doesn't mean that you have to live under the same house and sleep in the same bed and still be sexually active. But it's really important to create that safety, at least on the front end. And I'm trying to rack my brain to figure out an illustration for this, but it's the idea that you're just separating for the benefit of the marriage. And so if that is what the betrayed partner needs to feel safe, even though you may get external pressure from, because I don't know if it fits in our Christian paradigm, like separation in general, it can seem, we've talked about it before on the show, can seem so scary and feel like it's a first step toward divorce. But that idea, I think it was Eileen Fagan who was on, one of our clinicians, who talked about a therapeutic separation with intent to come back. So I just want to make sure that if a betrayed partner is listening, that that's affirmed, that if that's how you feel and that's what you need in order to feel safe, even if you may get that external pressure, it's still an okay step, because the hope is that your marriage will restore.